AI is only as good as the data that AI gets. That's just the reality of it. The number of inefficiencies was driven by the lack of accountability and the lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities in the handoffs across functions. When you think of I think AI actually enables continuous improvement.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Monika Mangla. She's a visionary leader in finance and digital transformation and currently serves as a managing director at Accenture, leading finance, digital innovation, and the resources sector. With nearly 3 decades of global experience across Fortune 100 companies and top-tier consultants, Monika has worked alongside the C-suite to drive enterprise-wide business transformation and continuous improvement with measurable outcomes. Her journey has spanned leadership roles at Chevron, where she served as a CFO for scene operations, and strategic positions at Deloitte, KPMG, and Accenture. Monika, welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Keith. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Where are you located at today?
Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Oh, it's
Having a
probably warm down there at this point.
lovely rainy day.
Wonderful. So Monika and I met a couple of years ago as Monika was speaking at a conference, and just excited to connect again and to hear what's been kind of new in your world and have a little conversation about continuous improvement. Of course, the mission here of our podcast is to improve careers, improve companies through continuous improvements. I know that, Monika, you've got an interest in and focus in AI, so we'll have a little conversation about AI today.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, Monika, one of the things that we like to start the podcast with is a little question about, we call it the spark. But I find that a lot of times people that I meet that are involved in this discipline of continuous improvement, however you describe it, for a lot of folks, there was maybe a moment or a particular memory where they felt like, you know what, this is really interesting to me. I like this as a career. I'm gonna devote my energy to this. I'm curious if you remember that moment, if there was a particular story that comes to mind for you.
Yeah, and I think thanks for asking that, Keith. Actually, you made me think number of years back. So you're making me walk down the memory lane here. I wouldn't say there was a particular instance or a moment where it was like an epiphany that I have to go for it. Rather, it was more of a strategic move that I had moved in terms of the practices when I changed, practice. This was a number of years ago when I was actually working with KPMG. I moved practices at that particular point in time and moved into the area of tax consulting. And as I moved in that area of tax consulting, that was the very first time looking at compliance processes and the planning processes, really starting to think about how do you actually drive optimization in these processes when you are trying to deliver value for an organization. So that is when I started reading more about methodologies like total quality management and how you can apply them, the principles to the back office processes. And that was pretty much my, I would say, entryway or the gateway to the continuous improvement thinking. And my one learning has been that once you get entrenched in that thought process, you can actually apply it in all walks of your life. It just stays with you. It just stays with you.
I love it. And that right there is one of the things that I find so interesting about, just everybody that I've interviewed on this podcast and just people I run into in this industry. That's what I refer to as the spark. It sounds like for you, there was some early experience in TQM, total quality management, but something kind of clicked where you're like, you know what, this applies to like everything. Like this is useful in so many
Exactly.
ways. So obviously you're working in like this AI stuff that we're going to tease a little bit and talk about, but I am curious if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your journey. So you had this interest in TQM, and there's trends and acronyms that get used over the years and things change. How might you think about your journey or maybe the evolution of this space a little bit based on your experience?
Yeah, I think, Keith, I would say where I see my journey having progressed in the area of continuous improvement has been very much in the area of applying the principles of various CI related methodologies, be it TQM, be it Six Sigma, be it Kaizen, in various situations. And I'll give you a couple of instances over here across the journey I've had from a professional perspective. Back in early 2010s, I would say I was working for Chevron at that particular point in time. And I had joined this new function that had been set up within the organization. It was the income tax accounting function. My predecessor had done a pretty good job in establishing the processes within a new function, but once a new function is maturing, as the workflows are getting matured, inadvertently, there are opportunities that are created to simplify and standardize your work processes, identify the fat and the waste, and start streamlining the workflow so that you're not only driving efficiency, but you're actually de risking the organization. And that was, a classic situation where I tapped into the principles of continuous improvement, especially Six Sigma, to streamline and basically make the processes both on a monthly and a quarterly basis extremely repeatable and trustable. So there were very consistent, repeatable, and trusted processes that we put in place. One thing I would say, I should have said that at the introduction itself, most of my career has spanned, frankly speaking, driving finance innovation within the corporate finance umbrella, focusing on back office functions. So I just wanted to call that out because if you think about the history of, continuous improvement, a lot of focus is coming out of the manufacturing space, asset heavy space. But what I have done and where I have played more importantly is taking those principles and applying them in the back office process space. So that is where I have leveraged or utilized these processes a lot, that lean thinking a lot. So a lot of my experiences you will hear are going to be in that context.
Excellent, excellent. So Chevron, a lot of a very vertically integrated company. I would imagine at Chevron, a lot of different things happening. Finance is a great discipline because it's probably of compared to like operations. Finance looks different, of course, but kind of similar in a lot of ways across a lot of different companies. So, how has the finance function specifically evolved
Mhm.
as you've been throughout your career? Are there some major transformational shifts that you felt like the enterprise has faced?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question you're asking because finance as a back office function historically has been a very rear view mirror looking function. You have a lot of focus on accounting and how you use the accounting data, which is very much looking in the rear view mirror, what was done yesterday. Where we see the massive shift coming into play within the finance world is people want to make that rear view mirror as automated as possible and start pivoting towards the planning and a forward looking view. So, how do I support my business? How do I support my operations? How do I support my customers and my stakeholders in a predictive manner, in a forward looking manner? How do I enable them to make decisions on a real time basis by providing them forward looking view of where they should be focusing on? So, that is where we have seen a massive, massive shift come into play in the finance space.
Interesting. Um, Moving into this, where things are going with AI. I know AI is this topic.
Yeah.
It's everything. It's also very. Everybody's trying to figure out how it affects them. I mean, it's obviously touching all of our lives in different ways. I think there's a lot of different perspectives on things where AI is really great for, and also things where it's kind of complex. Tell us what your thoughts are on how AI is affecting your role, or where you see it going.
It's actually interesting that you asked that. I actually think continuous improvement is entering into a golden era right now with AI, if you ask me honestly. And I say that because if we peel the onion and we think about what makes continuous improvement, especially when you look at the methodologies like Six Sigma or you look at Kaizen, what really makes them successful? There are certain foundational basic principles that all these methodologies espouse or they actually stand behind. They all are very much process driven. You have to focus on the process to make the process streamlined and standardized. They are all focusing on data driven decision making. They're all calling into a focus on customer centricity and value. So focus on activities where there is value to be driven for your customers or the stakeholder, whoever that might be. They are very much embedded into that, bringing a broad employee engagement, broad workforce engagement as you're starting to think about how to improve on your processes. And finally, they are looking into a very much culture of learning. So these are the foundational blocks for all these methodologies, irrespective of what these methodologies you use. And when you think of I think AI actually enables continuous improvement. I mean, AI with some of these, it actually creates this beautiful toolkit, in my view, with the tools like when you're looking at machine learning or natural language processing, you're looking at RPAs, especially in today's world with the agentic AIs. You're looking at visualization and other kind of analytics. These are all tools within the toolkit of the AI methodologies and the AI technologies that can actually make the continuous improvement much more faster and efficient. I mean, if I were to think back a little bit, two big challenges that I find that continuous improvement has had across the board in the companies, with the companies, at least in my experience, has been a resource and time. Right, time becomes a challenge because it takes time to collect the right amount of data, and the resources, the span of resources you need to engage to actually draw the insights that you need, draw the engagement that you need to really drive the continuous improvement. AI actually gets to the heart of both these problems. With AI's ability to be able to tap into structured and unstructured data, you can actually leverage significant amount of information and come up with really intelligent insights that can drive decision making in a very short period of time.
Could you give us an example? And by the way, I want to ask you to define RPA, just because we use a lot of acronyms on this, and I sometimes find folks are like, "Hey, what does that acronym mean?" So define RPA for us, real quick.
So RPA is robotic process automation. This is literally just automating a piece of a process or a process in itself as a part of your workflow. And agentic AI is when you have actually humans and the bots working together within a process.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so maybe you could give us an example of something that I agree with you. I think that we're in this golden age of CI because I know for myself, when I was in college, I dropped out of the statistics class twice because I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But now as as a business leader, I'm so interested in what you can get out of the statistical analysis, right? So here I am, somebody who values the result of what I could get out of that. But even some of the heavy analysis is like, I don't have time for that. Maybe you have some examples of ways that people who are in this continuous improvement discipline could leverage AI to do things that they felt like they didn't have time for previously.
Yeah, no, I think the immediate thing that comes to my mind, and something which is actually being, at least in my experience, being utilized extensively. And when I say extensively, it doesn't mean at scale, but definitely a lot of companies are playing in this space. Is actually two examples I'll give you. One, really from the field operations, and the other from the back office processes perspective. On the field operations side, if you look at some of the asset heavy industries, and I can speak from personal experience in the oil and gas space, in the energy space, predictive asset maintenance is one area where there is a tremendous focus, not just in terms of making sure you have efficiency, but now you're looking at how do I actually make sure that my assets continue performing consistently well, and you're using AI in that space.
That sounds really interesting. How exactly is that being used to help with that maintenance
So
schedules?
lot of data. If you look at, let's say, well performance, you take an example of that, or you're looking at your platform performances. You have tons of data that is being collected through the IoTs, through the sensors, on a ongoing real time basis, to be able to take all that information and process it very effectively, so that you're identifying areas that you need to focus on in terms of which assets may require maintenance at what particular point in time, so that you're really trying to avoid shutdown times. You're really trying to drive that safety, yeah, and reliability within the operations. That is a big focus point, and the ability of AI to be able to take that information, which is voluminous. It is like massive amount of information that is collected, and to be able to process it, to start providing that guidance to drive the predictive maintenance. That's a huge area where a lot of companies are investing, and it's still creating a lot of opportunity for companies to invest in to make sure that they continuously improve on the assets that are existing and are in production right now. That is one area I would say from the operation side when I've seen a lot of use case, so to say, of AI being used in continuous improvement. Another area that I can think of, from the back office side is especially when you think of, if you think of finance, I'll take corporate finance as an example. I mentioned earlier that a lot of focus people have is on the accounting side of it, which is rear view. Where we see the future coming in is more forward looking predictive side. So people are really, really interested in understanding and investing in predictive planning. And how do you actually do predictive planning, not just at the corporate level, but all the way integrating it down in the operations so that you're able to make the capital decisions more effective. And I think it really comes down to AI's ability to capture volume of information, multitude sources of data can be brought together, structured and unstructured, processed very quickly, and you are throwing out trends and insights which can drive almost real time, I would say, not completely real time, but almost real time decision making to make the pivots that you need to make. So those are the two examples that I would say, or the two areas I would say where we are seeing a real traction of how AI can actually enable continuous improvement.
Excellent. You gave me a couple of thoughts here that I want to address. One of the things I like to do on the podcast is try to drill into some different perspectives. And you mentioned that your experience is in this, let's say, finance. So I'm going to kind of paint a picture here. Let's say that most businesses are at the high level like three main things. There's a marketing and sales function to create demand. There's an operations function to build or do or provide the service or product that you do. And then there's this finance thing, which is to make sure everybody gets paid for everything that happens everywhere, right? Let's just say there's kind of those three. Sometimes those pillars, those functions don't always understand each other as
Hmm.
well as we all wish that we were understood a little bit better in our function.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if we could give you a chance to kind of speak to these other functions. Like, how does finance think about some of these things? And I'll just pause there and let you go
Now, I
on.
think I think I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm laughing here because you're right. Sometimes we get so absorbed in our domains, so to say, that we forget at the end of the day it's an enterprise.
Yeah.
And what drives value to the customer is the enterprise. It's not just a pillar within an enterprise. So I think that's why I'm laughing at your question. But I will say one thing. I will say one thing. Even though I work in corporate finance, and I'll give you a real life example where we have actually seen how you have to work across the functions, not just within a function, to truly drive meaningful continuous improvement. So I'll give you an example of, a few years ago, I was working with a client where we had been invited to look into and improve upon the invoicing process, as an example, within the finance organization, which was basically a sub function within finance organization for that client was a payables organization. We were working with them. So where they do their billing and invoicing and, they collect the payments. And as we started talking to them, I challenged them, along with my team, and we asked, why are we just looking at invoicing process? Why are we not going outside of your function, working closely with the procurement and starting to look at a source to pay process in its entirety, end to end? And, after some discussions, they actually realized that definitely the opportunity for improvement was much higher if they were to go an end to end view of that particular process from an enterprise perspective. So we started looking at something called source to pay, which is basically sourcing of the material all the way to you're processing it, you're selling it, and then collecting it from the customer. We brought that perspective in conjunction with a function that they already had at the enterprise scale called operational excellence, but only focused on the operation side of the house. So we brought them into the purview. We looked at this entire back office process all the way from sourcing the material to the collecting the billings, so to say, from the customer. The amount of efficiencies that we were able to drive by just that cross functional view of the process was phenomenal. And I was shocked. The number of inefficiencies was driven by the lack of accountability and the lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities in the handoffs across functions.
That's such an interesting
So that gets to the heart of the question you're asking that,
Yeah.
there are these pillars, but these pillars are integrated and they have to work together. I mean, another area that if I were to use the same theme, inventory is a huge, huge things for many of the companies that are asset heavy, for example. And inventory has direct impact to your balance sheet and your working capital. So unless you're able to work together across the functions within the enterprise, and you can actually think of processes truly in an integrated manner at the enterprise scale, I think you will leave money on the table.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com. I like this idea of addressing how finance thinks about some of these problems here, and I want to get at this idea of let's say from a strategic level, right? I mean, every person in leadership, every company now just is hearing AI, 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 and like they all know, like we got to do something about AI. And then I'm sure from a finance perspective, I'm thinking of an article that I saw recently that was published that talked about how few of these AI pilots are turning into business value, right? Maybe you could kind of connect the dots for us from how the finance people, we'll let you be the representative for all finance people everywhere. How
You'll get me
finance
beaten up.
people think about measuring the impact of continuous improvement, maybe broadly, but also how should organizations be thinking about how they approach this AI, like how do they allocate resources? What do they expect out of it? Maybe you could talk on, there's a couple of different angles there if one of those catches your interest.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think AI is the buzzword today. Everybody is trying to get on that bandwagon in some way, shape, or form. There's no doubts about it. And you are absolutely right. Reality is a lot of companies are starting with AI pilots, AI use cases, and they are going headstrong in it. And then they're realizing quite a few times that it's not driving the value that they originally anticipated. And I think there are a few reasons behind it. Um, the very first reason, and this is something that I have encountered time and again, and this goes beyond finance, by the way. Something that I've encountered time and again is AI is only as good as the data that AI gets. That's just the reality of it. And data, in all honesty, is not sexy. People want the output, but there is an input component to it, which is so important. So, investing in a solid data foundation and a really good data governance is very, very crucial to make sure that you can actually leverage AI effectively. That's the first thing. And most companies, if you look at the way companies have evolved, especially relatively larger organizations that might be operating in multiple jurisdictions, whether nationally or internationally, doesn't matter. Reality is businesses become very complex, and over time, that governance just falls through the cracks. It starts deteriorating. So data becomes, I think that investing in that and making sure that you're able to manage it and maintain it is super, super, super important. The second thing, and I'll just call out 2 points over here, which is really important. And, the second one that I find is critically important is technology is fine, but technology at the end of the day is an enabler. You need people. You need people to be able to understand that technology and run with it. And the biggest challenge that I see most companies face today is that the pace of change in technology has become so fast that we as humans are continuously trying to catch up. And that makes it very difficult. The change fatigue sets in then after a point in time. So I think, for the companies to be successful, to be able to use AI, foundational investments and recognitions have to be made, certain investments have to be made to make sure that you can actually leverage the benefit from it. It's great to talk about it and think about it, but unless you get that foundation right of the data and the people, the technology will not be able to do a whole lot there.
Definitely want to jump into all three of those areas. Let me start with, I think you mentioned either data foundation or data governance. Maybe you could give us like, what does that mean? What does that look like in an organization? How might somebody know if they have good data governance or bad data governance?
Yeah, so I'll separate data foundation from data governance. Although they go hand in hand, they're very integrated. And I'll give you just some examples over here. We talked about, we were talking about the field operations and asset maintenance, as an example. To be able to actually use sensors and IoTs on assets, right? You have to have a good definition of an asset. Only then the information you're collecting is going to be meaningful. Otherwise, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
So many companies may not even have a good solid asset foundation, as an
Like
example. So
there's
that's a
It sounds like there's a story there that you've seen something, maybe without disclosing anybody's dirty laundry, but what kind of mistakes are people making in their definition of, what an asset is?
I don't think it's a mistake in the definition, Keith. What would happen is that the definition may evolve over a period of time. And it really then becomes a question once you get the data, the amount of time you actually spend as an organization, and could be anywhere, could be in the operations, could be in finance, could be in the supply chain function, doesn't matter. The amount of time that people spend in cleaning up that data and making sense of it,
Yeah,
that is the inefficiency that you can
okay.
avoid if you are actually doing it right from the beginning. So I think that's an example of it. I wouldn't say it's the mistakes. I think it's really the amount of time and effort it starts taking to make sense of the information you are getting.
Yeah, the word I like is taxonomy for, like,
Yep, I agree.
using a consistent taxonomy or definition or language kinda broadly, like, if we're using different words to describe the same thing, it can create a lot of inefficiencies, and it's funny how sometimes it's just the simple things
Yeah.
that you just assume that, can create a lot of opportunity. That's very interesting.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the other one, just to interrupt you here for a quick minute, and sorry about that, but you use the word taxonomy, which is fantastic. Many a times, some people might be using the word metadata, which is also along the same lines. You just need to make sure that it's a consistency is there in how you are starting with a definition. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I bet, yeah, just, when you talk to finance, you talk to marketing, you talk to operations, you talk to, finance, one example is like, what is sales, right? Like, how many different definitions do you have? At what point are you measuring it? Oh, there's just so many interesting examples like that, where getting everybody on the same page with a common definition is important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You remind me of an example that I just came across literally 2 days ago. What is the definition of a headcount? HR's definition is very different from who's working in the field operations and someone who's working in finance.
That's so fun. But I'll tell you that I think as far as like lessons here, sometimes it's the simple things that are the things that we all overlook. And sometimes the answer to the problem could be just as simple as, oh my gosh, like we're saying the same things, but we're meaning two different things, or we're
Yes,
meaning the same thing, but we're saying two different things. And that just never ceases to just create awe for me, and how often language is the heart of like a process
yeah,
problem or a handoff problem or a culture problem or a respect problem. It's just the word that you're using is somehow infuriating to somebody else.
very true.
Okay, so I want to come back to this people angle a little bit because back to this idea again. Everybody has this perspective that AI is going to take over the world, and AI and consumer and the way that we all use Chat GPT or something is one thing, but how AI gets adopted in the enterprise is kind of a different thing. Like it's got to go through people. There's a change management part of it. I'm curious if you have any insights or advice or just an understanding of the problem of how AI actually gets adopted into the organization.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex question you're asking, and I don't think there is one straight answer to it, Keith, because the reality is we are all learning. We are all learning how AI can actually add value within an organization. Yes, there are significant instances and examples that we have in the real life where we are seeing the benefits of AI pop up. That said, when we are starting to look at the application of AI and the adoption of AI within an organization, how do we actually drive that adoption? I think it's a multifaceted question in my view. Number one to me, thought process that we have to live with, or we should start thinking about is AI going to take my job, or is AI going to assist me in my job? right? So two different things, because depending on how I view AI, my approach to adopting that AI in my workflow changes, right? I mean, am I going to hand over my job to them, or am I actually going to leverage them as an assistant, as an analyst, as a support that's enabling me my job in my job? And I think that is the first shift that needs to happen, and people need to be comfortable to say, I'm not giving up my job to AI. I want the AI to come and help me. Now, this does really create a question, I will say. I mean, and I'm not going to say no to this one. It does create a question. You can't have AI helping in every single role that exists today, because that'll be duplication, because there will be some roles that can be taken out of circulation because of AI. There is no doubts about it. But does that mean that people have to go away? I don't think so. I think what it does is it actually creates an opportunity to people for people to really start thinking about, what do I do with the time now I have to add more value to the enterprise? I mean, a simple example I'll give you. Again, I'll take a very, very rote finance experience here that I'll bring to the table as an example. Every single organization, when you're closing your books, meaning at the month end, when you're actually doing your P&Ls, your balance sheet, and everything, you will go through some kind of a variance analysis. Every organization does that. Very, very rote approach. Where you're looking at, how did I do this month versus last month, my sales, how did they do it, my revenues, where did my costs go up? So you will do a simple, variance analysis that every finance function does it. Now, do you really need humans to be doing that comparison? Or do you actually want to take that work, give it to a bot or give it to an agent, you know, and take the output of that and start analyzing it and drive the decision making in the organization? So you really haven't lost the person, but what you have really done is you have made the person think a little bit more strategic, understand the entire business, and enable the business to make the decision in the real time manner. So I think these are the kind of things that we need to think about when we think about people. Is we have to step away from thinking this is what is going to take my job. You have to think about, this is going to enable me in my job. So what do I do with my time now so I can add value or continue to add value? Does that help actually? Does that make sense,
I
Keith?
like that. I like that angle. And of course, we all want to be thinking about how can we add value. Let me phrase the question this way. Let's say you've got a child, a niece, a nephew who's maybe in their early 20s. They're pursuing a career in finance and they're asking you, hey, I can go down this path, or I can focus in this area. What are the jobs that might be eliminated through AI, or what are the things that I could do as somebody pursuing a career in finance to make sure that I'm on the side using AI versus the side getting replaced by AI?
It's an interesting question you're asking. I've asked that question myself, and I'll be honest with you. It's a question which is very near and dear to my heart. The reason I say that is I have quite a few friends, their children, my own kids are at an age group where they are actually either going to be entering college very soon, or they might be just getting out of college and getting into the workforce. So it is a question that is definitely out there and that I do think about quite a bit. So let me say it this way. If I just look at finance as an example, where I see, and I'll take a very rote, accounting. People go to college, they get a bachelor's in accounting, they'll go and work for a big four, like KPMG, PwC, or someone to do the auditing function. Now, there is a significant amount of work which is being done by the analysts at the lower level that AI and automation can completely take over. No doubts about it. Does that mean people should not study accounting? I don't think so. I think they should study accounting, but they should focus more on really understanding, when I'm seeing something from an accounting perspective, what does that mean? So you are actually elevating the thought process rather than being buried in the ticks and ties. This is what most of the accountants tend to do. Start thinking about, when I get this output, what it means. You will still have the role out over there. People will still need to hire you, but the value proposition that you're bringing to the table, the way you're articulating what you are going to be doing, that has morphed. So, to bring back to your question, what they should do or should not do, I think the education still stays relevant. The application of that education, though, has to morph from that rote, lower level work. I can just work in Excel. No, you don't have to do that. Think about what you can have computer do for you in Excel and the output that you're getting, what are you going to do with that? So pivot in terms of focusing on learning that rather than saying that profession is going to completely go away, because I don't think the profession is going anywhere, honestly.
So you might not have a long career completely just doing VLOOKUPs and reconciliations between
Exactly.
spreadsheets.
Exactly. You need to step away from that. I think it's that lot of the work effort, when you look at starting jobs, even in the white collar space. So, accounting, auditing, treasury, maybe even in the operations, if you're on the front, on the, not on the floor, but actually in the office space. If you look at it, lot of that work is about ticks and ties, collecting data, collating information. Those kind of those kind of roles, and I shouldn't say those kind of roles, those kind of activities are going to go away. There's no doubts about it, because the computer can do it much faster, much cleaner, much more efficiently. That's a reality of it. The question becomes, how do you actually use that output to make your job better?
Are there some skills or some training or just, I mean, maybe even thinking of some of the things that you learned in your own career, are there some ways that somebody can dive into that? I mean, there's like an inherent curiosity and how can I add value? I'm curious if you have any, maybe it's as simple as like core values, like be curious, or it's something like a certain training about change management or something. Like how do you kind of stay ahead of that change, or how do you embed that into somebody's mindset?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. From a training perspective, I would say being flexible is the most important thing, because you never know where the next technology is coming from. The pace of change in technology is so rapid at this point in time. Being flexible, being open to learning, absolutely very critical. I think one thing that I have found, which is more like a training that can be taken by, and this could be people at different levels of careers, doesn't matter what level you are, whether you are a student entering into the workforce or you have been in the workforce for a while. I think going forward, and even now, understanding data, understanding process, and understanding technology all hand in hand is critically important. There are courses you can take to really understand that, because whenever you think of continuous improvement, whenever you think of anything that has to do with how do I do my work better, you cannot separate a process from a technology. Technology comes inbuilt with a process, and the enabling piece of that is data, given the world we are living in. So, unless you can connect the dots across these three, it'll be very difficult to actually succeed in whatever walk or career that you are trying to pursue. And I'll give you a classic example over here. In the area of finance, corporate finance. What does finance organization really do? Finance organization is really a gatekeeper, actually, right? It's a gatekeeper of how I've been doing as an organization, as an enterprise. It's a gatekeeper where it's actually guiding me. Am I following all the compliance, etc., whatever I need to do? And it's actually guiding me, where should I be investing money. That's really the role of a finance organization, if you think about it. How did I do? Am I compliant? Where should I go forward? Right? I mean, that's what it's doing. It's a support function, which is supporting the rest of the organization or the enterprise. What is really important for people is not to create a financial statement. Rather, what is a financial statement telling me? So, this is a thought process change that you can do. And what is a financial statement telling me? That comes down to the fundamentals of understanding your data, your process, and your technology.
I'm curious about, as you talked about things like budgeting and where we should be going. I mean, I'm going to make an assumption here that you would be an advocate of organizations should be spending more resources, call it time, money, people, pursuing things like AI and how to, do that. What guidance might you give for an organization who's trying to put together a strategic plan and say, like, where should we put this AI thing? How should we look at this? Is this an R&D activity? Is this like how much should we be putting into this? Do you have any advice or insights on that question?
I think being a finance person, I genuinely do believe you do have to do a cost benefit comparison. I would not recommend to anybody blindly go ahead and invest in this AI technology or go ahead and invest in that. In the other technology. I think you really have to look at your strategic priorities. And I think every organization should be doing that due diligence. Define where do you see yourself going tomorrow. And based on that, start identifying if you have, let's say, 10 use cases. Out of these 10 use cases, how do they align to your strategic priority? And based on that alignment, do a cost benefit analysis of, where does it make sense for me to invest in. I will say one thing though, some of these technology investments or some of these investments in AI or some of the newer solutions may not give you a return immediately. So I think when I say cost benefit analysis, we also need to be a little bit cautious. Some investments are forward looking investment. You are basically investing to set up the foundation for the future. Now, data is a classic example. If you don't have the right foundational data, that investment may not look like it's giving you a value immediately, but it's setting you up for future success. So I think the cost benefit analysis, when I talk about it or when I say that, it has to be both quantitative and qualitative components have to be considered. But the most important thing in my mind is that it has to align with the strategic priorities.
You're touching on something near and dear to my heart with this cost benefit analysis. I'm curious if you have maybe a mental model or a way of looking at the world. Let's say somebody in operations wants to spend some money or some time on something, and they're trying to get a little bit of budget, and you're representing like this finance function, and they're coming to you for some coaching, saying, "Hey, help me put together this in a way where I can justify what I feel in my heart I want to do. I'm interested to go poke around with this AI thing. I think this is a great way to do it." Is there a way that you can help them think about how to structure that cost benefit analysis that would help them communicate that?
Absolutely. I think when we just think about the cost and the benefit, I mean, cost could be different components to it. And I'm oversimplifying it over here, but I'm going to take a step back beyond the cost benefit discussion we are having. Okay. But after I give you the answer to your question. So when I think of cost, I mean, some of the things that we would be looking at or we should be looking at is not just the pure investment you're making in the technology, but there could be the maintenance cost that comes with it, any kind of training, etc., that need to be undertaken. So there is could be different components of the cost that you need to take a look at it. There's also an opportunity cost, right? If I'm going to bring the resources, let's say, to work on this particular initiative, that resource could be doing something else. I should be building that as a cost in the cost model. On the benefit side, you may want to start looking at not just some pure benefits, which could be qualitative, maybe it's a revenue increase, whatever that might be, or if the pure quantitative benefit is not coming into play, then how is qualitatively that enabling you for the future, whether it is through a better training program or whatever that might be. I think that thought process has to go into it to really understand, when I think of benefit, when I think of a value, what does value really mean? So I think that would be my guidance to them, is think about that in the context of holistically within the enterprise, what is the total cost and what is the total benefit that you can give either now or later. Now, that said, I will say one thing, and this is something which is very near and dear to my heart, Keith. And maybe one of the reasons could be because I've worked a lot with larger organizations. I don't think every single initiative in a firm requires a cost benefit analysis. Because sometimes you can actually, how it is, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You can actually get into that form of mode where you just cannot move anything forward. I think you do have to trust. There has to be a healthy balance between what requires the rigor of a cost benefit analysis and what requires a judgment call due to a democratized decision making at the lower level. And I think that balance is critically important. It's going to vary from organization to organization because everybody's, I would say, thresholds, the operating powers, there'll be different drivers that's going to drive that balance between what should be really, really, very categorically, we should be looking at cost benefit analysis, and then where are some things that, because the people in the trenches know what they're doing, and you've got to trust that. You've got to trust that manpower, that judgment, you make that call. So that balance is important.
Yeah, I think where I hear you going with that is perhaps this gets into things like definitions and roles and accountabilities, but you said thresholds. So I'm assuming that you're kind of modeling like, hey, at different levels of the organization, you have autonomy to make certain decisions.
Exactly.
And I don't know if you have, more guidance, but I'm kind of picturing this idea of somebody's coming to you saying, "Hey, can we do this? Can we not do this? Should we do a cost benefit analysis?" And there's probably this level where you're like, look, if you don't need extra budget for something, if you're not asking anybody else to get involved,
Go do it.
it may not be necessary, right? If you have the resources and the time to do it, knock yourself out. That's kind of your domain. I think that's an interesting component of this like leadership lesson that exists in this continuous improvement domain. It kind of makes me chuckle a little bit because I can't, you probably have experienced this too. I chuckle a little bit every time I hear somebody in like a middle management role who says something along the lines of, we're waiting for the senior leadership to tell us what the goals are. Because I know on the other side of that, the senior leadership is probably saying, well, we're assuming that they know what they're doing and we're just going to hope that they continue doing it. We're trying not to, there's
Yeah.
kind of this like ambiguity that exists sometimes, and giving somebody permission to make decisions, I think, can be helpful as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it is something that I see more often than not, to tell you very honestly, where you have this, I wouldn't say vacuum, it's a lack of this. I think it's a differences in expectations. I'm waiting over here to hear from the top, and here it's like, these guys know their job. I trust them. Let them go ahead and do it. And many a times, even though the senior management might say it, people at the lower level, the middle management or the lower management, may not take an action item to take a decision. And I think that is where the culture becomes really important, in my view, that culture of trust, the culture of, just because I take a decision at the lower level and I fail, am I going to be held responsible for it? And I think those consequences, the negative consequences, many a times is what holds people back in taking a decision.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very, very important that if we want to have a healthy balance, where we want to enable our workforce and we want to have a healthy balance in terms of what decisions are made in a democratic manner at a lower level versus what decisions are actually pushed down from the top down level, it's really important to have a healthy culture of respect, transparency, and openness, where people understand and believe that there will be no negative consequences if my decision is not favorable or good or whatever that might be. Because
Yeah.
not every decision is going to result in a positive result. That everybody knows.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, there's plenty of industries and businesses where lives are literally on the line, and there's things that are very serious, but a lot of the things that a lot of us do in our work every day aren't quite that consequential. And sometimes having the initiative to try something, I think, is can be welcomed in a lot of organizations. And the initiative to
Yeah.
want to do something, I think, is when I think about like the waste and the waste that exists in the workplace. I mean, if you look at AI as this ability to generate infinite feedback,
Hmm.
ideas, analysis, I think the missing resource, maybe the constraint, is an engaged, motivated employee who wants to take advantage of some of those ideas and
Yeah.
and do something to make things better, basically, to really simplify improvement.
You're absolutely right, Keith. And actually, you just made a comment that some decisions are really consequential because lives could be at stake. Even in those situations, there are certain decisions where you actually want to trust the people who are in the trenches, frankly speaking. And I've seen that happen, especially in oil and gas industry. And in fact, pretty much across the oil and gas industry, most companies use this motto: if you own it, if you see it, you own it.
Yeah.
And I think it's right because when you are out there, let's say, on a platform in the middle of the ocean, corporate management doesn't know what's happening. And by the time you get to corporate management to get an approval for something, it might be too late. It's
I love that
really
mantra. If
out.
you see it, you own it. That's such a good one.
So, you are there, you make the decision. And this is truly in the spirit of continuous improvement, if you think about it, right? I mean, you're seeing the data, you're making the decision right there, you're making that continuous improvement. As you are actually seeing it, you are taking a decision real time. So I think I think it's I believe I really do believe that uh, everybody in the across the hierarchy in an organization, people are enabled. People just need to have the confidence to step out and take that step, especially with technology now making some of those decision making actually very easily, or the data to make the decision very easily available on fingertips.
Yeah. That's such a good point. I think that's probably a message for anybody listening, is like there's always something more that we could try, that we could do, an idea that we could have. And even if your last idea was somebody said no to, don't let that stop you from
Yeah.
sharing another one, right? Because um, yeah, that's a super good point. I'll wrap up with a little set of questions I like to call the rapid fire. These are just kind of quick answers, short answer, short phrase. Could be a word, could be a phrase, whatever you feel. So the first one is the most important job of a leader is to
Be a servant leader.
be a servant leader. Excellent. Is there a book that you recommend to somebody who's interested in continuous improvement that was maybe, your short list of influences?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have tons of other books which is not continuous improvement or business related, but not related to business.
Any sort of book recommendation you want to share with us is a fair answer.
I mean, one of my favorite, all-time favorite, actually, it's actually autobiography of a yogi. It's by Paramahansa Yogananda. It's a beautiful book which really talks about, continuous improvement of myself as a human being.
I love it. I'm always interested in book recommendations wherever they come from, whatever topic. When you think of all the tools in this Lean Six Sigma toolbox, is there one that's a go-to or a favorite for you that you love to refer to or pull out?
Six Sigma is what I've used the most, to tell you very honestly, and I love the principles.
Excellent.
And they
Excellent.
apply very well to the back office processes. So I think I have actually used them quite a bit.
Here's another finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is blank.
Entering its golden age.
Entering its golden age. Ah, I love that. That's a good one. Okay, I'm a big fan of questions. I love questions. I feel like a good question can really bring so much more context than an answer in situations. I'm curious if you have a few questions that you like, particularly as a consultant. I know consultants always have a lot of great questions. Are there a couple of questions that you tend to use quite a bit or are core to your toolbox?
Yes, I would say one thing that I love to ask people when I go out over there, and it could be, whoever I might be talking to within the organization, please try to answer why you are doing what you're doing. I think many a times we start talking about what we are doing, but we never talk about the why behind it. So my favorite go-to question is, when you are talking about something, please explain the why behind it, because the contextually, when we understand the why, it may actually impact the what.
I love it. Yeah, why matters so much. Well, on this thread of questions, I'm curious as an AI champion, if you were to pull, I don't know if ChatGPT is kind of one of your go-to tools, but I'm assuming you've got a go-to tool for AI. I'm curious if you were to pull up your thread of things that you've used AI for recently, maybe you could share a couple of those with us. What kind of things are you using AI for recently?
Sure. So I use Copilot more than anything else. I find it pretty helpful. And I think my last use of the Copilot was actually planning a road trip. And it was fantastic. We were going to actually take a road trip on the East Coast. So New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And I got some excellent ideas in terms of how should I be actually managing that road trip over the course of 7 day period. So that was my last use, which was fantastic. It was fantastic.
I love it. We've been doing something internally where we just kind of share a recent Chat GPT kind of, the
Uh-huh.
prompt and the response as a way of just sharing, like ideas come from seeing how other people innovate. And so, since it's such a new area, there's literally infinite ways of using it. But to try to figure out some ways that are useful to you, I also have recently relied on Chat GPT in my case to help plan a trip. And I had to double check to make sure that the places and the events and stuff that it was recommending were still there.
Relevant. You actually bring up a great point, Keith. Yeah, because I did the same thing. I did double check. I think what you're calling out is, and this is one thing that I have realized with AI is fantastic, and I think it is where the future is. There's no doubts about it. I hugely believe in it. That said, I think it is a reality that AI and the biases in I think we have to be careful. As human beings, it's very, very important for us to not just double check what we are seeing as a prompt come back from AI or the response come back from AI, but to make sure does it logically make sense. I don't think we can just hand off all the reins to a computer program.
I think that's an interesting kind of topic there about governance and how to use AI. What is proper governance with some of this AI utilization? Where do because I do think that sometimes people have a tendency to say, well, this is what I got from the AI and just assume it is truth. That's an interesting topic.
Now, it is actually a very interesting topic, and there's a lot of time and effort that actually companies are investing to drive AI governance within the organization. I think, but I will say one thing. I mean, we have spent, and when I say we, meaning, and I've seen the consulting world, Accenture in particular, have spent a lot of time and effort in developing the governance principles around how AI can be used within the organizations. I still feel a lot of companies are not there in terms of really having a solid governance to drive artificial intelligence within the organizations. I think a lot of companies are still in that space where they are playing with it, certain use cases, pilots, let me try it out, let me try it out. I think the biggest thing that people do have to make sure, in addition to thinking of AI governance or actually in preparation of getting ready for AI governance, is you do need to make sure that you have strong governance with respect to data. Because the biggest challenge with AI is it's really about biases, it's really about hallucination, and it's really about amplification of these when you start morphing, not just having one AI model, rather you are inserting bots within a workflow. So you're living in an agentic AI world. I think that is where you have to really make sure that what you're inputting as a bot or as an AI piece within the workflow is properly governed.
What is hallucination, and what do people need to know about hallucination as it relates to their use with AI?
So hallucination is really when the AI will be giving you an answer, frankly speaking, which may seem right on the surface, but it's actually not right. And this is where, we as individuals, we as human beings have to make sure that we are actually reading the information, the output that is coming from the AI prompt, wherever it was used, whether it was ChatGPT, Microsoft, Anthropic's Cloud, or whatever it is, whatever the model we are using, what we want to make sure is that we are actually incorporating that information, reviewing it, and ensuring does it make sense. It's not just bias, it's actually, it feels right, but it's not right. That is really what hallucination is all about.
This is just got me kind of curious on a topic. Are there times when people are saying, I want AI to help with this thing, but what they have is just something that they need automated?
Automate, yeah. So, you are absolutely right. When we use artificial intelligence, I think somehow we have tried to correlate artificial intelligence with these massive LLMs, the large language models, and the outputs that coming from these large language models. I mean, if you really think about artificial intelligence, I think of artificial intelligence as a suite of technologies, which has got different tools within its toolkit. That could be machine learning, that could be, RPAs is an example of it, because RPAs work very well if you think about the agentic AIs, because these are small bots, technically speaking, that have been inserted in a work process, or you're thinking of certain visualization capabilities. So to me, these are actually tools that are within a suite of artificial intelligence. So when we say AI, I think we tend to use it interchangeably with the chat GPTs of the world, that they're going to go and scour this entire world of LLMs and give me an answer. But technically speaking, what we are really doing is using a machine to automate. So I completely agree with you. I think sometimes you don't need a massive, massive LLM to give you an answer you're looking for. All you need is you can simplify it much more. I have a process, and there's a piece of a process that I can automate by calling in a small routine or a small task or something which would serve my purpose.
Excellent. Excellent. Wonderful. Well, Monica, thank you so much for joining us here today. This has been a very interesting conversation about AI. I'm super excited to see where things go. And for everybody that's listening in, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We really appreciate your time. If anybody would like to suggest a guest or ask a question, you're welcome to find Monica or myself on LinkedIn, and will be in the show notes on this episode. So we encourage you to give us a like, give us a follow, check it out on the social channels. And please share this podcast with your friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.